In Diablo 2, there are 48 runeword weapons with a wide variety of weapon types they can work in. Today we're going to go over the runewords that work in polearms, most often desired for use on Act 2 mercenaries. These runewords can also be useful on two-handed character builds as well, such as Fury Druids, Whirlwind Barbarians, and even some more niche builds as well. For the sake of sanity on these weapon videos, we will be grouping the runewords into 4 clusters: almost never used, the weird no man's land, then the sometimes used, and finally the highly sought after. It is important to note before we start that while this video will show these items in a variety of bases, both polearm and non-polearm, for the sake of saving my runes, these all will work in polearms. The commentary will be based on the polearm uses of these runewords, and you should refer to the video for your specific weapon type to see if a runeword works in that and how well it works. It is also important to note that since common misunderstanding, spears are not polearms. Polearm only applies to items with the explicit polearm class descriptor. With that out of the way, let's begin. Starting at the bottom of the barrel on polearms, to get the oddballs out of the way first, we have Wind, a bit of an odd beast of a runeword that won't make it on any recommendation lists, but that is special in requiring only 2 slots with the runes Sir and L. If it was cheaper, the runeword would be loved for faster run walk, increased attack speed, target blinding, etc., but due to its high cost with the Sir rune, it generally sees very little use on bigger weapons, often being favored for weapons that don't necessarily need a lot of hitting power instead. On the rare case it is used, so generally you'll avoid using it on a polearm, but it does have its uses on other weapons even if it's not best in slot even for those. Next up, we have a 3-socket weapon that also sadly doesn't do great in polearms. That is Venom, requiring Tal Dol Mal. It is a bit easier to find these runes than it is to find the runes for Wind, but also sadly generally fits in a different weapon set with poison damage, ignore target defense, and mana leech, as well as hit causes to flee. This runeword will have its time to shine, albeit on a more necromancer or assassin friendly weapon group. After that, we move on to a runeword most often used for meme builds on scepters that most people don't realize can go into a 4-socket polearm too, and that is Rift. Requiring Hell, Ko, Lem, and Gull, it is extremely expensive, but also kind of fun to play with due to the tornado and frozen orb chances to cast features. Outside of that, it doesn't do a lot though, giving some stats, attack rating, fire and magic damage, etc. I definitely can think of better uses for these mid and high runes though. Another 4-socket oddity we have is Passion. Made with Dol, Ort, Eld, and Lem, this is best known for its use on Zeal variants of various classes, though usually not on polearms. Passion does have a handful of basic mods with increased attack speed, attack rating, blind target, etc., but most notably it has plus Berserk and plus Zeal skills that can be used by any class. The big drawback of this weapon though is the fact that they kind of have you stick a Dol rune in it, which is where you get that chance causes monster to flee, which is frustrating as heck when trying to deal with Zeal, regardless of whether you're using a polearm or a phase blade. At the bottom of the sometimes list, or is it the top of the almost never list, we have several runewords in that no man's land of funny but too expensive for funny. Starting with Phoenix, and it's only barely here on polearms because it can fit in for a bit of fun. This runeword is extremely expensive, requiring 4 pricey runes, Vex, Vex, Low, and Jaw, so it's not recommended for the faint of heart or people without resources to burn. With some interesting chance to cast perks, redemption aura, decent enhanced damage, fire resistance reduction, mana leech, deadly strike, etc., the list goes on, it does have a solid set of mods despite costing way too much for them. This polearm has a few uses on some extremely niche builds, but rarely is seen in mainstream builds, at least in the form of polearms or weapons. Needless to say, if you're using it, you want to play with fire. Hand of Justice is kind of in a similar boat to Phoenix, and funnily enough, also fire-themed. It's just too overpriced for what it does, but it still can be fun to play around with. This one, though, at least has increased attack speed for its ridiculous cost of Sir, Cham, Am, and Low. This weapon is mostly known for its use in Holy Fire builds with Dragon, but it also packs some Life Leech, Blind, Freeze, okay enhanced damage, ignore defense, and Deadly Strike, so it can hit okay. It's just, there are things that are much cheaper that can hit harder. This is fun, albeit expensive, and it kind of sits neck and neck with Phoenix in that almost in the bottom tier list, but not quite. This next one I've kind of pondered about where to put it. It's usually just made in armor since the weapon version isn't nearly as nice and costs the exact same, El Sol, Dol, and Low, and that is Fortitude. You don't see it often, but it's also not the worst thing ever. With enhanced damage and defense, resist, life, chilling armor, and deadly strike, you can do some stuff with it. I usually wouldn't put it in a polearm since it would be a bit of a waste of a low rune unless you have a ton of them. It's not bad enough to go with the useless, but it is so much better in armor than weapons, and unfortunately it can go in literally every weapon with enough sockets, so I'll get tired of talking about it by the third weapon video. Coming off of Fortitude, we have a weapon I want to like, but still had to make especially for the Runeword weapons video because I can't decide on a build for it, and that is Eternity. Costing Am, Bear, Is, Soul, and Sur, this weapon isn't bad, especially considering it can go into an ethereal base, even for a player, since it has Indestructible. It also packs Life Leech, Crushing Blow, Blind, Slow, Cannot Be Frozen, and Magic Find, and is a weapon you can kill your paladin to boot with if you want to use the Revive skill. It just doesn't quite stand up to snuff with the big dogs in any of the weapon trees for me, so I just made it in something that I felt I could have a fun time with, even if I'm not going to use it often. There just always seems to be something better for the cost. If you want something a bit more chaotic, then do I have the Runeword for you? Destruction, Enhanced Damage, Crushing Blow, Ignore Defense, Mana Leech, and the chance to cast Volcano, Molten Boulder, and Nova while fighting, and even dropping a meteor if you die. It's unfortunately too expensive for just a little fun at Vex, Low, Bear, Jaw, and Co. It'll break the bank, but it's cute. Generally, you'd see it more on swords than polearms, but even then, it's usually more of a weird flex than necessarily a good choice. Last up in the weird no man's land is Call to Arms. Why you'd make this in a polearm? I have no bloody idea. It can go into any weapon out there, and you're giving up a lot of bonuses throwing it into a two-hander. For Am, Ral, Mal, Ist, and you have plus skills, increased attack speed, enhanced damage, life leech, and some other odds and ends. The reason you want it in a one-hander is that this weapon is used almost exclusively for pre-buffing, with a slew of war cries attached to it. You would generally want to use the runes for this rather than just making an okay life leech polearm for whacking things. Next up, the list turns around a bit, as we have one of the old runewords that fell out of favor for a time that still isn't bad, but there are better for your weapon slot in most cases, and that is Silence. Only working in the biggest polearms, requiring 6 slots that you can fill with Dole, Eld, Hell, Ist, Tyr, and Vex, Silence is a fairly well-balanced runeword with high resist boost, plus skills, enhanced attack speed, hit recovery, damage boost, mana leech, blind, magic find, etc. It's a long list. It does a little bit of everything, and is the master of few. The main thing that keeps it from being the great polearm, though, is the hit causes monster to flee problem, and generally doesn't work well with melee weapons in general. Switching up to something a bit more aggressive, though also unfortunately also expensive, is Fury, Jaw, Gull, and Eth. It's one of the original runewords, and its age unfortunately is starting to show, much like Silence. It's usually not seen simply because Jaw and Gull are in high demand for other runewords. This item is still a solid weapon with a good attack speed boost, damage, ignore target defense, life leech, deadly strike, and open wounds. Though polearms are some of the least used for this runeword, even back in the heyday, because it has a bonus to frenzy as well, which makes it a lot nicer for one-handed weapons rather than two-handed. Staying on the aggressive swing, we have a runeword I actually enjoy playing around with on other weapons, and that is Doom. Super expensive, costing Hell, Low, and Cam. It's not something you'd rush to make, but with Holy Freeze, plus skills, enhanced damage, deadly strike, open wounds, freeze target, and reduce cold resist, has a lot of niche uses that can be a lot of fun. Though the keyword here is niche. That's why you don't make it early, since it's better to equip your essentials before you start making weird stuff, and this counts as weird stuff. Though with the changes to resist, it could see its use in single weapon slot increase in Resurrected, though probably not polearms. Going back down to 2 sockets and dirt cheap, we finally get a runeword that can do okay, at least early on in polearms, and that is Strength. A well-known runeword using Am and Tyr that works in any melee weapon. While not endgame material, an early access to Crushing Blow, Life Leech, Strength, and mild damage boost makes this weapon a fairly solid holdover until you get to your mid and late game polearms, especially nice for such a low cost. Still on the small side, at 3 sockets, we have a runeword I would put higher for my personal use, but definitely belongs in the sometimes group, and that is Malice. Super cheap at Ith, L, and Eth, this runeword is a staple of equipment for Act 2 mercenaries, especially in normal, since their life regen automatically offsets the life drain of this weapon, letting them take full advantage of the open wounds effect that makes this weapon so useful at the low and mid-level stages of character development, especially in solo self-found. It is also usable by a player, though generally you'd prefer one-handed weapons for that kind of use. Though going from interesting and quirky to extremely mundane, we have the often forgotten Honor runeword. 5 sockets packed with Am, El, Ith, Tyr, and Soul. This is a generic good polearm, plus skills, enhanced damage, life leech, deadly strike, pinch of stats, a few others. It's not special, but it's also not bad. It's also not terribly expensive, not to mention a lot of really good polearm types cap at 5 sockets. So, not too much to write home about, but still decent if you happen to have an extra 5-socket polearm laying around that you want to use on a lower level character. This next runeword definitely gets a bump because I have a bias for it, since for some reason my RNG angel attracts runes, and that is Crescent Moon. Costing Shale, and Tyr, it's not terribly expensive, and on quick glance it doesn't look super impressive with increased attack speed, ignore target defense, some damage, open wounds, etc., but where it really shines is that 7% chance to cast Static Field on striking, essentially giving you an elemental-based Crushing Blow. This also helps to do closer to Crushing Blow damage even on resistant enemies thanks to the 35% reduction in enemy lightning resist from it. While I usually use it in one-handers, it's actually not terrible for a mercenary weapon either if you slap it in a 3-socket polearm. In contrast, we have the only runeword that uses Zod, which is only expensive thanks to its rarity, and that is Breath of the Dying, a 6-socket runeword requiring Vex, Hel, El, Eld, Zod, and Eth. You heard it right, it uses 2 rare runes, making it actually cheaper than some of the other options on this list. It's just an all-around solid runeword that's weirdly priced, and that you should 100% wait for a good ethereal weapon for if you just want to make it. It packs high increased attack speed, good enhanced damage, life leech, attributes, mana leech, a few other decent modifiers. It's got a huge list. It's a very big runeword. It also feels weirdly generic to me though. Like someone said, let's make this item have all the good normal mods, some attributes, a poison nova on kill, and nothing else that's really special. So I can't say it's bad, but I can say that I want something more interesting usually because I like weird stuff. This is kind of boring. Next up is the start of the big money runewords. This is actually sought after polearms by some people, and yeah, you want to be going for these. The first one being Pride. Taking some expensive runes, it is a bit of a premium runeword at Cam, Sur, Io, and Low. It provides a massive boost with high-level concentration aura attack to it. The user of the weapon won't be doing massive damage, but most of their allies will. And it has several tools to keep the bearer relatively safe, with blind, freeze effects, vitality, and life recovery. It also does have some bonus to attack rating and damage to demons specifically. This is not an uncommon runeword to find on summoners specifically, usually using it with a Might Mercenary from Act 2 to further boost the damage output of the army. While not recommended, it is also a meme to make iron golems out of it too, since they retain the aura effect, though that is one really expensive golem and you will be very mad when it dies. After that, we have Obedience, easily one of the most recommended budget polearms for an Act 2 mercenary, especially considering how strong its mods are for the cost of Hel, Ko, Thul, Eth, and Fall. This polearm packs a level 21 self-enchant on kill, faster hit recovery, decent enhanced damage, reduced enemy fire resist, crushing blow, some resist, stats, and even some defense among other things. It's just extremely solid. Will it help the team? No, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a better polearm runeword for anywhere near the price, since this one it's just generally only beaten out by very specific uniques for its role, especially when you're playing with a build that doesn't need the bonus auras from some of the other options at the top of this list. Speaking of auras though, we cannot go without mentioning one of the most used runewords in the entire game by both high-level and low-level players. That is Insight. Super cheap, requiring only Ral, Tyr, Tal, and Soul, this runeword provides a massive buff thanks to its meditation aura. You almost never see it on players though, instead almost always being placed on an Act 2 mercenary as a support for a caster. It also packs a few nice mods such as enhanced damage, attack rating boost, some elemental damage, pinch of magic find, and also a few levels of classless critical strike to boost the damage even further. It's not a terrible weapon without meditation, but with it, it makes it highly desirable. The other superly commonly used polearm is also used for its aura, but it's a lot more expensive, costing Bear, Maul, Bear, and Ist in that order. And that is Infinity, most known for its use on Act 2 mercenaries with lightning trappers, holy shock builds, and lightning sorceresses. It is actually useful for a massive number of characters thanks to its defense reduction as well, making it a lot easier for you to hit your targets. Even beyond that though, this polearm also has other desirable stats, especially crushing blow, magic find, enhanced damage. Most of the other stats can be useful to players with lightning resist reduction, faster run walk, chain lightning on kill, but it's still almost exclusively a mercenary weapon. So what are your favorite polearm runewords? Mention them down below, and be sure to give a like if you found any of this useful or interesting. And a special thanks to the patrons, channel members, and, well, Twitch members as well, for making all this content possible.